Okay, well, that was a little bit abrupt, but hey, everybody, this is LiveJazzKC presents Swapping Force podcast. And today I'm excited. I've been working for a while, try to get this guy on to have a chat, and it's finally come to the time. So, with no further ado, I just want to introduce everyone again to Mr. Adam Larson. So, Adam, thanks so much for taking time today, man.
Thanks a lot for having me, Herschel. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I know we've been trying to do this for a while, and it just so happens to be that if you look back through the catalog of these chats I've had, I seem to have had a pretty heavy saxophone, heavy guest list, but which is fine with me. And if anybody doesn't like it, I guess they don't have to check it out. But certainly excited to have you here and chat with about what you've been doing, what you have going on. Kansas City, your family, your history, all that kind of good stuff, man. So first of all, how have things been for you lately?
First of all, thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking about all of that. And yeah, I mean, I think things have been good, man. It's just a constant cycle of chaos and craziness, as I know you know from being a parent, but I think yeah, things have been really nice. Been keeping busy, and I've had a lot of records come out in the past couple years, and I have another one coming out in April. So I'm just kind of gearing up for the last installment of this trilogy project. But overall, man, can't complain. A lot of really good things happening. So I'm looking forward to getting into it today.
Yeah, the parenting thing just like completely changes your world, doesn't it? Which I know that you're a great dad. You seem to gush over your kid quite a bit, and you have what, two kids now, or just a one?
Yeah, two boys.
Two boys, yeah. You gush over them quite a bit, and I totally understand. I have three boys and one girl, so it's the fun never stops there. Now, you mentioned your trio like trilogy project, and for anyone who isn't familiar with that, you did a triple set of trio records. Is that the best way to say it? I don't know. You did three trio records.
Yeah, yeah. So the idea was, during the height of COVID, I was just thinking to myself, how when we come out of this, if we come out of this, back to something that's normal, how can I make the most of it? And I would decide to compose a lot of music during 2020 and 2021. I never opened up Logic until March of 2020, and let alone GarageBand. So it became a cool tool for me to kind of fiddle around in and write some new tunes. Of course, I didn't really have any idea what they're going to sound like with real people for about 6 to 12 months later. And over the course of writing all this different music, I just felt like it would be cool to try to put together some kind of project that will kind of center my efforts. Something I struggle with personally, I always have, is just um, focusing on things that are within my control. I think as an artist, that's something that people can relate to, is if you allow yourself to be concerned about what other people are doing or how you compare to so and so, a lot of that time is just wasted energy. So I'm finding that as I get older, I never really had time to waste energy or time, but I have even less time to do that. So trying to focus my efforts on a project that would keep me busy for at least year and a half, 2 years seemed like a good idea. So I just thought I would try to record some music with people that have been important to me in different cities that I've either spent some significant time professionally in or lived in. So the idea was to start with Chicago, because that's where I really kind of had my first opportunities to play at major clubs of national prestige, shall we say. And then from there, I did a Kansas City recording, and then the one that's coming out in April is a New York City trio. So there's lots to get into there, but that's kind of the essence of it, is like a way to stay sane during all of it, and also keep me inspired and focused for a sizable amount of time.
Well, I get it. And by the way, from what I've heard so far, of the two that you've released have been just completely incredible, great compositions, and really nice stuff. And to say that you have some saxophone calisthenics that most people would envy is an understatement. You just amaze me with your proficiency on the horn, with without question. But just the musicality of what you're writing is just beautiful. So thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that, man. It means a lot, certainly. I don't take that for granted, and it means a lot. I don't know. I feel like just again having something to set my sights on, and keep myself busy. And it's been a challenge too to book out tours for each of those separate events. But I don't know. I think it's been a worthwhile investment.
Oh yeah. Well, now I'm kind of going back into the beginning of the pandemic, and the things that everybody dealt with as musicians. And I know specifically, having just sort of witnessed your tribulations through that time, having been pretty new to Kansas City at that point, it was sort of a transition for you to figure out kind of how to make that work, and the things that you did, with including writing these records. But you know and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, but you seem to really find a way to be positive throughout the whole thing as you possibly could, because I know it was it was hard to be positive throughout that time for somebody who relies solely upon performing and clinicking and touring and that kind of thing. Colleges weren't having clinics and festivals and that sort of thing, so that I can't imagine how many. I know at one point you had mentioned how many gigs were canceled over a short period of time, and it was staggering. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I hope this guy figures it out, because what a travesty this has been. But when you started coming out with some of your educational material that you published, your the leaps and sounds, and your duet book, which I had the opportunity to play through with a guy a couple days ago, and it was a blast. It was a finger buster a couple times, and but it's awesome. And if anybody out there is a saxophonist, specifically, check Adam Larson's stuff out, man. I know AdamLarsonJazz.com is your website, and I'm sure all that can be purchased through there. But your for lack of a better word, kind of etude books that you have written over standard tunes in a couple different levels, are incredible. But you really took that opportunity to start creating some content, which I've spoken to people at every age level, from high school kids to senior citizens, that have been in your book and been like, this is a total workout. Man, how does this guy? He's some sort of masochist on the saxophone, but it's wonderful. So kudos to you on being able to, come through this with some positive output. And I'm assuming that I'm sure didn't fill the gaps entirely for you, but it did keep you on a positive road, to music. And so talk a little bit about those books and how that came to be, and what was the impetus behind those.
Sure. Yeah. So a similar impetus to doing the records, trying to find something that I could spend my time where I was focused, and I've always enjoyed writing. I wrote the first A2 book in like 2018, shortly before, I should say, our second son was born. We were still living in New York, and trying to figure out a way to make some quote unquote passive income. Anything that's passive, you have to put some marketing behind it. So it's not truly passive if you want it to continue to sell. But um, it wasn't at all the impetus to start. I just wanted to write an A2 book, that fit kind of a very specific niche. So the first one was all time, which is like, so I
I'm
wrote some.
I lost your audio for a second. I'm sorry.
Um,
So
so
you
yeah,
were talking about the books. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, the books came about from wanting to write a specific etude book that would cover the altissimo range of the saxophone, as well as playing in different keys. That was the first book I put out, was called Leaps and Sounds in 2018. And based on the success of that one, I was inspired to try to write some more. And during the pandemic, I had a lot of time to do it. So at the time, my younger son would only sleep in a car while it was moving. So I would drive him around, get him to sleep, then I would park and I would move from the driver's seat to the passenger seat, and I would compose. The majority of the books that I put out during 2020 to 2022 were written in the passenger seat of my car while my kids slept, because I was going to go crazy. I was like, this is 90 minutes to 2 hours of my day where I'm just sitting in a car. I had to be productive. So I feel like I was able to write, I think, 8 or 9 different texts, over the course of 18 months. And yeah, there was, it kept me positive. It kept me focused on something as much as I could. It kept me not thinking about the fact that I wasn't actually playing my instrument, for a very long time with other people, which was important to me. But the pandemic also opened up, the notion of doing a lot of stuff virtually. It's kind of tapered off now. A lot of people don't want to do it, and understandably so. But I was able to do, I think I did 52 clinics in 2021, all virtually. So like one a week. It wasn't really like that. Sometimes it was 3, 4 a week and nothing the next week. But smaller appearances, that otherwise wouldn't be possible unless I was already in that area. So yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it still sucked. Obviously, everybody didn't enjoy, what we had to, and there's a lot of struggle for everybody. But, for myself personally, that's the way that I was able to try to stay as sane as I could, was to write these books. And, I've always felt like if you're gonna bring a product into the world, especially at this point when everybody can do it, it's important to think about how it's gonna help somebody. It's really easy to like make a cash grab type offering. Anybody has Sibelius or Finale can hit transpose and make a hot lick book, that has a gazillion licks or whatever. But I feel like it's important to have something that is steeped in some type of pedagogy that you believe in. So that's kind of the aim of my thing, is like, okay, how do I make something that eventually will help somebody, hopefully in a large demographic, So that's a little bit about the books, I suppose.
Yeah, well, they're great stuff, man. And I like how you've had some of your some of your lead sheets available as part of some of these things. And I always enjoy like going, and checking out lead sheets from guys and just kind of trying to get inside your brain when you compose, like what does it look like when you compose? And I know it's not how it looks like, but it's the product at the end that you're kind of checking out. I know, guys like Bob Reynolds sort of did that a few years ago, and I bought a bunch of his to kind of just see like, okay, how does he put these together? And it's, for someone who's attempting to compose on a regular basis, it seems to be helpful just from a standpoint of influence and kind of understanding the approach that someone else takes to that. And so thank you for that as well. Now, with regards to your move to Kansas City, and I won't belabor much of this, it's been talked about a lot, but I know that you came to Kansas City from living in New York City, and you made the switch for a number of reasons. Your wife's family is close by and whatnot. And but overall, what's your experience been like in Kansas City as a whole, from a culture standpoint, from a music scene standpoint?
Sure, it's a great question. Yeah, so like we moved, my wife's family is actually from Long Island. So my family is from this, like the Midwest. They're from Illinois. I grew up in
That's
Illinois.
right.
Yeah. So for her, it's been I think if you ask her now, she'd say it's a great adjustment because she started her own business about 12 months ago. And to be in this part of the country, it's certainly a little bit easier to get all that off the ground, much lower overhead than trying to do that in New York City. I would say, like there are probably like 10 to 20 days out of the year where I really miss living in New York, and whether that's artistically or it's usually just artistically, because the thing about New York is that it's such a difficult place to live psychologically, financially, artistically. But I very much felt like by the time I was ready to move out of New York, I had done most of the things I set out to want to try to achieve. And there was always an opportunity for me to go back and try to scratch that itch, should I feel like I want or need to do that. you know. So yeah, I mean, I like living in Kansas City for the most part. I think it's a great fit for my family. Certainly my young boys, you know, my son being in kindergarten here is great. The one thing that I'll just say that's kind of a hard adjustment for me personally is I run pretty quickly with everything, you know, and so there's sometimes I feel like there's a lack of urgency in the Midwest, not just in Kansas City, but in the Midwest, there's a lack of urgency compared to what it is in the East Coast. And sometimes I enjoy that, sometimes I don't enjoy that, you know. So it kind of goes, it kind of goes both ways. But yeah, I mean, having this as a home base is great. It's centralized everything I do. You know, doing runouts for what I do September through May in education has become a lot easier. Just because I'm centrally located, I can drive to places that are otherwise really hard to get to. You know, multiple flights and ads expense and blah blah blah. But yeah, I think I would say like for the most part, 8 out of 10, you know, living here. And some of that is my own doing. Some of that is just like, again, focus on things that I can control, you know, and not letting things that I can't control, get to me too much, you know, and that's what's going to be everywhere you go. But, yeah, I just think there's a fundamental, atmospheric, tangible thing that is different about East Coast energy versus any other, any other energy, frankly, you know. So it's just a matter of, I think I'm coming up on 4 years being here in May, so I'm slowly easing into it. Anyway, hope that gives you a little bit of background on where my head is at.
Yeah, no, and I can't believe it's already been almost 4 years. I remember hearing, matter of fact, I think I ran into you in St. Louis, sort of adjacently at Sax Quest, and shortly after I saw you down there, it seemed like I was hearing that you were moving to Kansas City. I was like, no joke. I just saw that guy down, and you're doing a little trio clinic at Sax Quest, and then I heard you were moving here. I'm like, oh man, this is going to be killer. Like, there's another incredible guy who's going to be at the, you know, at the grasp of people here in Kansas City. I mean, we had a really rich, we still do, but I mean, there was an incredible amount of just saxophone talent and teachers and things between. You were here shortly after David Valdez moved here. We already had Matt Otto here. We have, you know, of course, Bobby Watson had been here for a long time. There's some saxophone influence in town that was just super rich, and it is a hotbed still. But and I know you're keeping a fairly full schedule of teaching. I know you have a number of students, one of which whom is playing in a big band that I direct for the LiveJazzKC High School All-Star Band. Shout out to Mateo Navarro, and he's a hardworking kid and really good attitude, man. And you're doing good stuff with him. And I push him every day, and I say, hey, man, if you have trouble, go talk to Adam about this. And he's been wonderful to have in the band, and he gets excited to be a part of it. And I think you're lighting that flame for him super bright, and it only bodes well for his future in music should he choose to continue with it.
So I like teaching a lot, man. And yeah, shout out to Mateo. He's definitely a bright light, and I'm sure he's going to do great things in music, whether it's on the education side or performance side, or maybe a little bit of both. But yeah, it's been interesting. Like, if I'm being totally candid, I kind of want to teach less. You know, I've been teaching lessons now almost daily for like 14 or 15 years, with their exception. And so, you know, I enjoy teaching, but I also realize that, especially with my wife having her own business and needing to accommodate her schedule as best I can, and being out of town and so on and so forth. Even though my teaching primarily is done, you know, online, which is great. I feel like there are other ways, as I kind of ease into the backside of my 30s coming up, that I'd rather be maybe using my time a little bit differently. I do enjoy it. It's not that I don't enjoy it. It's just I feel like with anything, once you do it for a decade and a half or more, maybe just a different way of going about it. So, you know, to that end, I'm putting out a different video masterclass that'll come out in April. So maybe have some different ways of reaching some people in that format, which is something I've done previously. But yeah, I just feel like it'd be. I mean, ideally, I like to have a full-time job, you know, at a university somewhere. But that's an entirely different Zoom conversation to be had.
Well, I just happened to notice there was a full-time position at K-State available just the other day. Which probably isn't your gig, but it was one with the Division I athletics program, which you'd mentioned you wanted to be a part of.
Yeah. Well, I just, I was out at University of Oregon last week, and I went to the. I mean, I get, I didn't know this. I sat next to some gentleman who had season tickets for his whole life, and he's telling me about Phil Knight. Is the guy who, I guess he's a U of O alum, and he's the founder of Nike. And so their facilities there are just bonkers. And I was like, man, if I got to teach in a college atmosphere, it'd be great to have like this down the street.
Oh yeah, I mean, for sure. And there's as a huge college basketball fan myself, I mean, I like college football, but I'm a much bigger college basketball fan. Places like Oregon and have the beautiful, state of Baylor, KU's historic, Duke, Kentucky, those kind of joints to me would just be all in Indiana. And so many of those schools are incredible music schools as well, So yeah, I hope you land one of those. And certainly if there's anybody qualified to do something like that, it would be you, and now just for what it's worth, I wouldn't mind if you would be okay with this. I'd like to take a second and play a track from your With Love from Kansas City record, if that's cool with you.
That's totally fine.
And I picked out this tune, Life Cycle. So because I enjoyed listening to it. But tell us a little about this track and who's on it.
Yeah, so this track is like you said, it's from With Love from Kansas City. Who is on it is John Kazillermood on drums and Ben Leifer on bass. I'm playing tenor on this particular track. This is a tune that I wrote when I turned 30, just 3 years ago. And yeah, I was thinking about, I've made it maybe, if I'm lucky, a third of the way through my life. And that was, I don't know, that's the only kind of story behind it. It's kind of got like a Toonbow type vibe. At least that's what John put on it, and that's what it's been ever since. So that's one thing about my composing that I kind of like. I try to be as flexible as I can, because I'm not going to come up with a better drum groove than John, so I'm going to give it to him and say I defer to you. And if it's not what I'm looking for, that's the thing I love about these musicians on each of these records, and frankly anybody that I hope to employ, is that they're flexible enough to hear me say like, that's not quite quite what I was looking for. Can we try X, Y, or Z? And then when they do that, it sounds better than I could have possibly have conceived of. So anyway, that's a little bit about this tune. So thanks for sharing it with everybody.
Yeah, and I will take a second and say, if I had to pick a trio rhythm section, Ben Leifer would be the first person I would talk to. He's just so musical. I love his playing. All the nuanced stuff he can hear and do is just amazing. So, and John goes without saying, his musicianship is world class, but you've got a great band with you here. And I don't know that there's a better one to be had anywhere, much less Kansas City. So with that being said, this is Life Cycle from the Adam Larson Trio album, With Love from Kansas City. So yeah, I'll just play this here and enjoy. Yeah, man. Wonderful, wonderful track
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
for sure. So now getting in, to your saxophone or musical influences from a standpoint of, I mean, I know when studied as a young kid and you played saxophone since you were young and you went to school. Now, early on, I mean, this is Kansas City, so I'm always interested to know, first and foremost, how much Charlie Parker's influence played and what point of your development did that seem to have the biggest influence?
Sure. It wasn't early, that's for sure. I mean, I remember going to Walmart, and I had some grass mowing money, and I bought the best of Gerald Albright and the best of Charlie Parker when I was 12, and I turned them both on, and I really couldn't get into Charlie Parker at all for a lot of reasons. And context is important. I mean, I've been listening to boy bands, Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, and then like Christina Aguilera and all kinds of stuff that had nothing to do with anything, sonically even, but not, at least which musically, as they compared to any kind of jazz. So like turning on Donna Lee, I might as well have been listening to something that was from like an alien spaceship, and then turning on Gerald Albright, he played Georgia on My Mind, and the groove was something that I could identify with. The sonic quality was something I could identify with. And frankly, like the alto sound was just something that was more pleasant to my ear at the time because I had no context for anything, So I remember driving to a basketball game, because at the time I was just a kid. I wanted to be a basketball player, and we were driving to a game, and I heard Jared Albright play and I said, "Wait a minute, that sounds like a line that guy Charlie Parker played," and kind of a light bulb went off in my head. And so then I got the Omni book from there, and I started to try to deconstruct or understand some of the stuff in there, which was only mildly successful. I think one of the things of being educated that's kind of nice now is you can look at those books and you don't know exactly what's going on, but you're certainly more informed about what's going on than I remember looking at measures 3 and 4 of a B flat blues. And Charlie Parker is playing all these notes that have nothing to do with the chord changes there, and I'm like, man, it sounds great, it feels great, but how does it work? So, I was more. My grandfather was a big band era disc jockey for 61 years. He had a local radio program in Galesburg, Illinois. So, when he passed away, they couldn't find enough people to donate I mean, he had, tens of thousands of records between the house and the radio and everything else. And so I was exposed to big band music through him and my father, so, Count Basie and all kinds of musicians, probably earlier than I was exposed to Charlie Parker. But, I would say Bird hit me the most when I was in college, because in high school I was playing more tenor. So I thought, my influences there were very quickly Joshua Redman, Bob Mintzer, and Michael Brecker. Those are the guys I really liked a lot. And when I got into college, I went through a deep Chris Potter and Donnie McCaslin interest. Nowadays though, I've really been checking out Keith Jarrett's quartets, both the European and the American. I didn't even know he had quartets until last October. And Ben Turvitt, great bass player here in Kansas City, replied to one of something I put online. He said, "Have you ever checked out X, Y, and Z?" And I checked it out, and it's kind of where I've been sitting on for the past 4 or 5 months is just those different records. So I would say Bird didn't hit me in a way where I was ready for it or able to decipher it maybe until I was early into college.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's understandable. There's a lot to digest there and to unpack from a musical standpoint. But from a jazz language, modern jazz language standpoint, I was, like I mentioned to you prior to the interview, I was speaking with Eric Alexander. He said, basically, I'm paraphrasing, until further notice, he says, if I wanted to stop teaching lessons altogether and never have another student again, I would just tell them all to go learn the 50 bird heads and master them, and they would have the entirety of the modern jazz language at their fingertips completely at that point. He says, and until further notice, that will be the way it is. All from then on, everything took off from there. So I'm always interested to know, because you mentioned Donnie McCaslin and Michael Brecker and those guys, and so much of what they do is rooted in that same language of harmony and rhythmic things and all that stuff, that it makes you know, he certainly brings you back to understand how big that influence was of Charlie Parker. Now, you know, naturally he was a Kansas City native who made his career worldwide and much in New York City, but we still claim him here, and it's a big part of our history and ties to jazz history in Kansas City, as well as the prior to him with the big band stuff and all the Basie and Moten and all those other guys. But I'm always interested to hear how much influence that had on you, and if it's so, at what point in time, because it's not always the same answer. And you know, there's guys who get the omnibook in, you know, high school and start beating themselves through it, and there's guys who maybe like yourself, like the first jazz record I ever got was Heavy Weather by Weather Report. And it was my stepdad's CD, and I was like, this is kind of hip. And then next thing you know, I got, you know, Harry Connick Jr. Big Band, and then all of a sudden I got Charlie Parker, and then it started to expand from there, and all that. So you know, it's certainly something that will be different for everybody, you know. So thank you for answering that so wonderfully. Now I know we've been on here a while. You have any other kind of like news that you want to share with anybody? I know you have a tour coming up and you got a release coming up. What's the latest on the New York album?
Sure. Yeah. So I just got my physical copies of the last installment of the trio trilogy project last week. Pre-order on those will go out sometime in March. I'm bringing Matt Closey and Jimmy McBride. Matt is on the record. Jimmy is not, but he's a longtime collaborator. I'm bringing them to Kansas City for one show on Wednesday, April 19th. It'll be at the Westport Coffee House and Theater, 7:00. And then from there, we move to Memphis the next day. We're playing the Green Room at Crosstown Arts. After that, we go to Rudy's in Nashville, then doing a private event in St. Louis on the 22nd, and then a nice collaboration, a church concert in St. Louis as well on the 23rd, and then they go back home. So, yeah, I mean, I think on the horizon for me, you know, getting past the trio record, which is still, you know, yet to be released, but I have a great quintet record that's coming out in the fall. It's a mix of Kansas City musicians and Chicago musicians. So it'll be myself, John Kazillermood on drums, Clark Summers on bass, Chris Madsen on tenor saxophone, and Scott Hesse on guitar. So that's going to come out in the fall, and we'll tour that a little bit around the area regionally. You know, other than that, I'm just trying to book out my fall a little bit, get some things on the board there. It's always a constant effort to get things lined up in the time frame I need to. So yeah, I would just encourage, if you're around the KC area on the 19th of April, come out and check out this show. It's the only time the trio's probably ever going to be here in that format. So it'd be wonderful to see everybody there. But other than that, yeah, I think we've covered a lot of diverse ground today, and hope the listeners enjoy some very saxophone specific stuff. So
We didn't get too far into the saxophone nerd weeds though, because that can happen real fast. For sure. Now, I like to kind of finish things up with kind of like lighthearted, fun, off the cuff questions. So I have a couple of questions, and I'll preface this by saying, try not to be political in your answers, because it's no fun when people are political, right? I want to know, first and foremost, so we'll get this out of the way. Give me your favorite Kansas City barbecue restaurant, period.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say a period one, man. I feel like Gates is really great, but when it's not, it can be a health hazard.
Well, like for me, the Gates burn-in on bun sandwich is the number one go-to. If I'm eating nothing else but I got to pick one thing from one place, that's what I'm getting.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I mean, I like a bunch of different places as well, but that's the knee-jerk reaction is Gates for me.
Yeah, totally good choice, man. And quite frankly, there's no wrong choice. I'm just interested to hear what everybody. Now, you could say something like Rosedale barbecue, and I would probably have to like shake my head a little bit and go, well, but somebody along the line is going to go, hey, that's my favorite joint, and albeit that's fine with me. Second thing is like how do you think, I know you're a sports fan, like if you had your druthers, would you rather have an NHL team or an NBA team come to Kansas City?
NBA 100%, because I'm a huge basketball fan.
Me too. I'm 100 NBA all the way. Now you pro downtown stadium for the baseball team while we're on the sports topic? Baseball stadium. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a disaster. They've had exit like 12 or 14 or whatever that is, closed for like 2 years. So I can't imagine how disruptive it's going to be to put a downtown base. But we'll see. I don't know. We'll see.
Part of me kind of hopes it goes into the West Bottoms,
Yeah,
because that seems like such a cool spot, kind of with downtown overlooking the baseball stadium, and it kind of in the flight path of the airport, and it could be less impactful to traffic, in some regards, possibly. And I just think there's a lot of opportunity down there for space that's maybe not being utilized, like it could be, but. Some good stuff down there, but I think that would be a really hip spot to have it with all the ability to have so much nightlife down there and walking distance, sort of expand the footprint of downtown.
totally.
Yeah, Denver sort of did that as their downtown started to grow from their baseball stadium. It kind of goes in every direction, and there's pockets of downtown areas that are all separate and cool, and I dig it there. Now, if Now, I guess give me your favorite NBA team real quick. Who's your squad?
Oh man, that's difficult because I just watch sports to decompress at this point, and I was a long time. I'll give you my historically. Like historically, I'm a Phil Jackson fan. So when Phil Jackson no longer coached the Lakers, I went back to the Bulls, and I was a big Tom Thibodeau fan. So like, it's heartbreaking to be a Knicks fan because they never do anything and they do everything wrong in the offseason because James Dolan is an idiot. So, I
Yeah,
don't know. It's hard. I like the
I'm,
Celtics, like the way they look. I like the Bucks. I like small market teams. So I know it's not Boston, but like it was cool to see Milwaukee win it because it's a very small market basketball team. It'd be cool if
Milwaukee. Yeah, Milwaukee's my team at my house because my 11-year-old loves Milwaukee, so I sort of adopted them, and I've always liked the Brewers. But as a kid, it was 100% Chicago Bulls because we got WGN at my house in Shawnee, and we saw every single game. And Michael Jordan was on the team, and so that was it for me. And I'm still a Bulls fan. And then when my Jayhawk Kirk Heinrich was there, and Drew Gooden was there, I was just even more excited, And so
sure.
it's been hard to watch them recently because they haven't really competed, but I still like the Bulls for sure. Now, secondly, like I guess my last question really for you is just kind of in general, like I know you've been listening to the Keith Jarrett records, like, but what in terms of jazz artists that are kind of you're certainly of the younger generation of jazz, but you're moving through the ranks and becoming a peer to some of the older guys and stuff like that. But there's some guys coming up now that I've been noticing, younger talent, and I say younger loosely, but like that are coming onto the scene, I should say. Who have you been noticing? Not just saxophone specifically, but like I'll start by giving you somebody, just as an example. In the last couple of years, guys like Patrick Bartley, who I'd only ever been exposed to because of the Live at Emmett's Place YouTube stuff, and then all of a sudden, my mind was blown. Was like trying to find out more. Now he's got a record coming out and all this stuff. But you have any of those guys that you're aware of that maybe you might share with the people to check out?
Sure. Yeah, music's such a small world, Patrick and Emmett and I and Benny Benak. Benny Benak and I were roommates. We shared the same room together, like no separation. His freshman year of college, he was a groomsman at my wedding. Emmett and I did all the national honor programs together when we were kids. We've known each other probably coming up on 16 years now. And Pat and I were in school together. We were in combo together. So it's just funny because like a lot of the people that you mentioned are either friends or classmates or a little bit of both. Pat is wonderful, incredible, of course. And he's also, he's just such like a worldly person. He speaks fluent Japanese. So he has like a really cool J-pop band that, it's just, he's off the charts talented and a really good dude.
I should say that I absolutely love his approach and his playing. It seems like it's so rooted in such like kind of a throwback sensibility with a modern approach to harmony. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. He just has a lot of history. He can, that's the kind of thing too, is like when you can digest an influence and do a great imitation of it. And then it kind of gives you the license to be yourself. I think a
Yeah.
lot of that have that wired the wrong way. You know, it's like, oh, I'll just be myself. It's like, well, coming from what, you know? So, yeah, I mean, when we were in school, we did it. Only downbeat record I ever won award I ever won in my entire life was the MSM Manhattan School of Music Chamber Jazz Ensemble, and a we did a takedown of two bass hit, the whole record, and we submitted that as like the small group, whatever. We didn't even do it. It was the school that did it, and it was Pat on alto, me on tenor, Benny on trumpet, Kate Davis on bass, Emmett on piano, and Jay Goldbass on drums. So really stellar group. And man, I was trying my best to be like 1950 whatever trained, which is, you know, not easy. And then you had Pat, who just sounded exactly like Cannonball. I mean, it was like you could not tell a difference, but you could still tell it was Pat, which is the hallmark of a really, you know, not a great player, but a great artist. So, yeah, Pat's super special. I mean, of my peer group, which is just a little bit older, we're not that far apart in age, Pat and I, but we're, you know, looking up from my peer group, some people that you might check out. Alex Larray is one of my favorite alto players on planet Earth. Got a very unique sound, very unique compositions. My favorite tenor player of my peer group, hands down, is Lucas Pino. I don't think there's a better saxophone player in my.
He's amazing.
I mean, for me, that's it. Like, that's the guy who is the best of my peer group. Emmanuel Wilkins is certainly amazing. It's another younger name that I would encourage people to check out. I mean, I'm trying to rack my brain. It's like the same thing when you ask people like what tune you want to play, and your brain just goes like to nothing. But yeah, Nicole Glover, I really like. She's a wonderful tenor player out of Portland, who's in New York now. These are all saxophone players. The piano player that plays the manual that people should check out is Micah Thomas. Absolutely incredible piano player. There's a really wonderful bass player named Daryl Johns, who's, I mean, just off the charts talented. So that's kind of a cool thing about jazz and any music really, is you can trace, you know, you can do a Venn diagram or a tree or something and figure out like half the people I just said that either work with each other in different projects or there's some kind of correlation or whatever, you know. But if you sifted through even a third of the names I just recommended, you'd probably find your way to all the other names I just said, you know. So there's a lot of tremendous talent, and every single year it seems to deepen the, you know, the branches of it. So it's cool to be a part of it in some way, shape, or form, just to like have known each of these musicians at different stages of development or continuing to see their development or being a part of it or whatever. So yeah, it's probably more than you wanted, but I try to give as much love as you can to all the peers that are out there doing it. So
for sure, man. Well, that's great. And with that, I will say thank you for your time. We've been doing this a while, and I look forward to speaking with you more and hearing more about what you got going on. Please let us know anytime. I try to post everything you're doing on our calendar and our daily calendars that we have. And I'm happy to do so and want to continue to support everything you're doing. And I want to try your wife's cookies sometime because they look amazing when you put pictures of them online. I'm like, oh man. And you don't live that far from me. I just live down K7 from you, like 10 minutes. But I'm going to take us out, man, with this audio from this, I guess, your quintet from a track called Suitable Replacement. It's from about 7 years ago, if that's okay with you. I just totally dig it, and I think it's a great track, and I can't wait to listen to it. But I will say that it looks like on here, if I'm saying it, you've got on guitar Matthew Stevens, Fabian Almazan on piano, Matt Pinman on bass, and Jimmy McBride on drums, and yourself. So yeah, anyway, so this is the Adam Larson Quintet. This is a tune of yours, yes?
Yep, it was recorded on my third album as a leader.
And you've done, this will be 7 or 8 now?
The one that comes out in April will be number 8.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that's amazing, man. Keep it going. Well, with that, I thank everyone for checking it out. This is LiveJazzKC Swapping Fours podcast with Adam Larson, and we're going to take it out with the Adam Larson Quintet on Suitable Replacement. Thanks again, Adam, for all of your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Talk soon.